Welcome to this talk. I am Margarida Anselmo from MAZE, and today we're discussing the road to social outcomes contracting in Europe, learnings and years ahead. Last year, 2021, was a big year for us because we closed 3 SIBs that had been running since back in 2017. Both the Code Academy and Fast Forward SIBs, Tackling Unemployment, and Projeto Família, working with children at risk. And yet it is important, and I guess kind of in our nature as intermediaries, to also reflect on the points where we feel this instrument is yet to fulfill its true potential from our perspective, and of course in a Portuguese context.
Certainly some of the things you've described around some of the technical complexities, bureaucracy involved when you're managing especially multiple projects at the same time through a fund, for example, can be quite burdensome. At the same time, I think we're seeing that some of those issues can be addressed with good design, for example, if you're thinking about an outcome. So we think that one of the interesting things with impact bonds is the promise or the opportunity for these approaches to lead to more systematic public sector, public administration reform. For an impact bond to really achieve that potential, you have to be really deliberate about it. So if you're designing a project, you want to think really early on, how are you going to capture that learning? How are you going to disseminate it? And how are you going to embed it within your organization, whether you're an outcome funder or a provider?
That process, look, the outcomes for those people in the end, for whatever, whether it's young needs or loneliness or whatever the subject is, the outcomes are central. We're going to focus on that, and we can just manage, around that. And in the end, I think there's this risk of that people tend to still see it as a financial construct. So the further you're along and the closer you are to starting off the project, suddenly that initial thought disappears, and we start to look at, okay, can we manage risks there? And can we set up this legal contract? And I think that's definitely still a challenge that I recognize.
The question of scale is a really interesting one. What do we really mean by scale? And I think actually I would challenge people to even articulate, why do we keep talking about scale? Perhaps a little bit of tension between saying that we want to use things like impact bonds for sort of like really locally led, locally designed solution versus scale, right? So I just think it's a just really interesting question.
What outcomes contracts do inherently is that they do not stick to the clear borders that government puts up in their departments, or central versus local, or different areas that there are. And I think and automatically that leads to an agency problem, because maybe one department is funding, but 3 of them are responsible for that problem, or the other way around.
Across the board in the UK to try to understand some of the rationales for why a government agency would be interested in impact bonds as a tool to achieve public sector reform. Certainly collaboration was, one of the key reasons. We know, I think similar to lots of other European countries, and government officials and their partners in other sector is really challenging. And, we've seen it in our work, just trying to shift from inputs to outcomes and articulating what you want into outcomes, and not just sort of any outcomes, but, time measurable outcomes. It is really challenging. It's, we believe it's worth doing. And
for this mindset and skill set to be successful, that's where we need to focus. Like, it's not sustainable if there's, with all good intentions that we are all here, but if it's outside actors trying to solve this through an outcomes-based manner. I think in the end, it needs to be public sector itself who needs to be able to set outcome indicators, think about how they want to price that, how they want to set up partnerships, and with whom. I think all of those questions eventually need to come out of the public sector.
We are trying to influence public sector, but in the end of the day, we are not public sector. So where's the line of like when we should just stop pushing if there is no
Well, we shouldn't.
interest?
We shouldn't.
I guess not.
No, I mean,
we shouldn't,
there's. I don't think we should underestimate that the public sector, at least in the Netherlands, but the central government more so than local government, but depending on the cities. I'm sure Lisbon and Porto have quite big city teams. I mean, they're big organizations that are hard to change. And you see that in sustainability, where there's such a big public push to change pension funds or to change banks to start taking sustainable. I mean, we need to. There's a push needed in the public sector as well on climate, but also on the social side. And I think we shouldn't stop. I think that's just our. We should just be humble and and go back and do it again. I think that's the only way.
What we found really powerful through our work at the Go Lab, it's actually encouraging peer-to-peer learning. And with a lot of our work and a lot of the convenings that we do, even though we do a lot of research and we like to believe we know some things about impact bonds, I think we have the humility to accept and admit that we don't have all the answers. And the most fruitful conversations we've had with government officials is actually when you bring them together with perhaps sort of more experienced colleagues or colleagues who have been through the process of, for example, developing an impact bond or managing one. I do think that what's missing is some sort of like more coordinated engagements across the different organizations, government entities and so on, doing work in Europe.
I wonder if you're open to doing a little bit of future seeing and like try to guess at what do you think the next years of outcomes-based missioning are going to look like, or what do you hope they're going to look like?
Coordination across the board and the recognition that whilst each country will face very specific challenges, there's actually a lot that we can learn from each other, and we can really accelerate practice and learn from best practice. And I think we like to say at the Go Lab, let's not reinvent the broken wheel. What I'm seeing is in the UK is a shift from the language of impact bonds to that of partnership. So outcome partnerships, social outcome partnerships. And to be fair, in all conversations we have with government officials, we always start with a discussion about the outcomes rather than the instruments.
Concept phase in a way, and we're now in a like development stages where there's so much happening that a lot of people thinking about how we can best apply this, and what structure works. Do we do it at scale, or do we do it very small, or do we outcomes funds or not? And I think there's so much. I'm very hopeful that we're laying the groundworks for much more outcomes-based policy making and outcomes-based partnerships, like Andreea is saying.
These partnerships, what do you think we can do to like contribute to the best possible future? So to these outcomes that we are hoping for.
The most exciting thing for us in terms of the research that we do is actually what's the broader learning that we can unpick from the experience with impact bonds, and how can we apply it to other parts of the public sector or the provision of social services, public services.
The best we can do is try to facilitate all of the groups around us and try to see and again, I think through reports, and we try to do the same here, like make sure that the things that we learn on our left side, we're bringing that knowledge to the right side, and make sure that we can connect people. And the chair of our board is a professor in ecosystems. He always tells us we need to be Webbers. Apparently that's a term, and we need to be Webbers and make sure that we connect those different ecosystems to each other and facilitate that.
All right. Thank you so much, guys. Have a great last day of your week. And I'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's it. All right. Yeah.